Welcome to Film at 50, a podcast that celebrates semi-centennials in the world of cinema. I'm your host, Brian Rowe, and I'm very excited to welcome Ify Nwadiwe of the Maximum Film podcast to my podcast today to talk about Shaft, starring Richard Roundtree, released 50 years ago today, July 2nd, 1971. How are we doing, Ify?
Good. Did you come up with the name so you can do that alliteration at the top of the show? Was that?
Yep, it was all about the alliteration. So it was either Film at 50 or Film at 40. So I was like, I love films of the 80s too. Do I want to wait 10 years to do 80s film?
But you got the what was it, the semi-centennial cinema? The like that.
Yeah. So I have Film at 50, celebrate the semi-centennials in cinema. Yeah, that's not an accident. I'm an English teacher.
Oh, really? Oh man. Well, I gotta say, I have respect for you. Fun fact. My 7th grade English teacher, I just sent him an email. I don't know if it got to him though. He never got back, or he saw my tweets. But yeah, basically, he's the reason that I am a TV writer and like kind of comedian now, because he was the first person in my life to be like, hey, Ify, you're a really good writer. I don't know if you ever considered writing. And I was like, no, because I never, it seems so silly, but really, just so you know, Mr. Rowe of whatever class you teach, it was that just made, like, it seems like it was just that moment. And I think back to it often now, knowing what I do.
It makes a huge difference. My 5th grade teacher, Mrs. Frodall, like pulled me aside one day and said, you should write, Brian. You're really talented.
Wow.
I want to see that book on the shelf one day. Keep at it. And that 10 seconds from her, probably she's never thought of since, but that stuck with me my whole life. And those moments really make a difference to young students,
I know. So you got the good one. The other kids who were saying she was part of the Lord of the Rings, they got detention. That just lets me know I still have my class clown tendencies. That I heard her name, immediately heard Frodo, and I was like, oh,
yeah, exactly. So before we get to Shaft, Ify, I'd love for you to talk about kind of your career and what role film has played in your life. You talk about your podcast, Maximum Film. It would be fantastic.
I mean, film has played essentially, technically, and actually, all words that shouldn't be used together, a big part of my life. Like, I grew up in LA, and I always kind of loved cinema and film, mostly TV, but I did watch like a lot of movies growing up, just all around. I remember the first movie I cried in, which was Titanic. And I remember watching it in the theater, seeing everyone sniffling and being like, oh, it's okay to be sad at this moment, and crying at a young age. But yeah, it's always, it's funny because it's one of those things where the deeper you look into it, the more it makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. Because, my dad's from Nigerian, and they're a huge part of African culture is like storytelling and kind of like almost sometimes improvised storytelling, passing down stories. And I think that's something that always kind of stuck with me. I remember all my uncles or my dad telling me, fables, or even like simple tall tales, like my dad saying when he first moved to LA, he used to party with Michael Jackson downtown and would make these like lavish stories. And I just kind of like loved that. And I think, like I kind of told you with my English teacher, once kind of writing became a thing, and it kind of became a interesting constant, because I used to really actually be into art. And, I remember one time I would be drawing these comics, and this kid told me, he was like, you are a great writer, not that great of an artist. He was like, you should consider hiring a art person. And this is like 10th grade. This little dork tells me that I should consider hiring someone to do the art and he's like, because the stories are good, but the art is meh. And so, but I've always wanted to act. But, my dad, straight from, Nigeria, kind of wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer. Like acting just was beyond that. And he kept kind of keeping me at bay. And then eventually I started going for it myself. And at that time I was already doing improv, because improv I started in high school and kind of never looked back. It's always been a part of my life. But once I found out that going to the Upright Citizen Brigade in LA, started by Amy Poehler, Matt Besser, Matt Walsh, Ian Roberts, I knew that's where I needed to be if I wanted to start working in the industry. And it kind of
Mhm.
became history from there. But it's funny because as much as I write and as much as I love writing now, it was always kind of like the acting comedy of it first. And I
Mhm.
think I learned about writing and my ability to do so the same way I learned about acting, because I
Okay.
met someone at a improv party and they were like, I was like, oh man, I'm not an actor. And they're like, what do you mean? You're an improviser. You're just acting without a script. And then it was like light bulb. And then all of a sudden I got my confidence in acting. And then it was kind of learning how Second City, used to write their sketches where they would improvise it and then write down what happened in the sketch. And I mean, in the improv scenes, and then that would be the sketch and then they punch it up.
Mhm.
And once I figured that, I've essentially always been writing, because, you hear the phrase, everyone's like, write every day, write every day, write every day. And depending on, who you're
Yeah.
hearing it from, your assumption is that source material that you're hoping to get. So, when we were in sketch, everyone thought you had to write a sketch a day, write a sketch a day. But really, it wasn't until Phil Jackson, who, funny enough, is my boss now on NBC's Grand Crew. When he came out here from New York, he was our sketch coach. And he was the one who was like, no, anytime you write counts as writing every day. So if you write a funny tweet, take it serious, write a few funny tweets.
Mhm.
That's writing your day. If you write, a bit for a like YouTube video or skit, he was like, just writing every day. It's not necessarily has to be a full fleshed out, because like,
Mhm.
scripts are hard and all that. You don't have to get a page a day, but just get in the habit of writing.
Mhm.
And it really has paid off, in case there's any like potential writers or current writers. Really, it does feel like a mode you turn on. Like
Mhm.
as silly as it sounds, I do notice like the jokiness and like the kind of like hard jokes I tweet enhance when I get into a room, because my brain is in joke creation mode. And
Mhm.
then when I'm kind of chilling and I'm like, acting more or doing a lot of like bits for things like Smosh and Achievement Hunter, it's more observational, and I don't really carve out the jokes. It's just like a funny thing. So it's really interesting how it really is like this mode you set your brain in. But since then, in the grand process of like everything on my path, when Ricky Carmona stepped away from the podcast formerly known as Who Shot Ya,
Mhm.
I came on and I looked at it as an opportunity, because I always felt like there was a huge kind of gap in like my film repertoire, because, like I said, my dad was from Nigeria. Most of his movies were like Nollywood movies and just like the more mainstream. My mom, from Louisiana, and she liked movies here and there, but she was like a big suspense thrillers. So there weren't
Mhm.
any of like the quote unquote classics that I had. So I was like, oh, if I get with, these huge film nerds like Drea and Alonzo, they're going to send me down a pass. I still have a list of every time Alonzo suggests something, I do write it down and I try and get to it. But as you can see in my background, no one listening can. I like too many things. I have these anime figures behind me. You see the mechanical keyboard for gaming. You see the photos I took, photography. I am a man of too many hobbies, and I'm trying to be good at all of them.
Yeah, I've had Alonzo on the podcast twice now.
Oh yeah.
We've talked about Scrooge and Willy Wonka and the Chocolate
Oh,
Factory.
very much
And
his movies.
yeah, exactly. And I've been following him on all of his podcasts. He has a bunch.
Oh
And
yeah.
then he told me about the one that you're on, and I started listening to it. I was so amazed you got Richard Linklater on an episode
Yes, that
like a few
was
months ago.
amazing. Yeah, I was like, wow. It's kind of like my cool thing I get to tell to all my film friends, because, if ever the Before trilogy comes up, I talk about how we did that runner, and then I got to speak to him, and
Mhm.
it's like my cool moment.
Yeah. So what's been the best part of doing that podcast? Like working with Alonzo and Drea, and how long have you been doing it now? How many has
Oh
it been a
man,
few years?
it's been a year now.
A
It's
year.
been a
Okay.
little over a year
Mhm.
now. And yeah, it's I think the fun thing is when I get pushed to see movies I know I never would have
Mhm.
like went to see on my own, but fall in love with.
Mhm.
Like, Drea loves how much I love Judy, because, I'm definitely not someone who like seeks out biopics, especially
Yeah.
like, yeah. But seeing Judy and, the biopic and the story of Judy Garland, who is someone who I like knew of, but
Mhm.
didn't really like, I haven't went down her film history. It was really fun, because it was like, that's the fun thing about like biopics about
Mhm.
people in the movie industry. It feels like a Russian doll, because like you open this movie and then it opens your mind to these other things you want to check out now, and you want to go down the history of it.
Yeah.
So I would have never even thought of checking that movie out if it weren't for the podcast.
Well, that's fantastic. I love the work you're doing on there. I'm excited to listen to your episodes to come.
Yeah.
And now taking us to Shaft today, had you seen this film before? Like, what was your kind of, how did Shaft play a role in your life?
Yeah, I saw the remake before last, the Samuel L. Jackson Shaft.
They're all called Shaft.
Yeah, they're all called Shaft, and really, it really is a good device when you think of it, because it's like, yeah, that's his last name, so you can have as many Shafts as you want. And I wish we would treat Shaft like a James Bond, where we just get to see these new Shafts. Like I want the Shaft spinoff where it's his cousin, and that it's the West Coast Shaft and the East Coast and the Chicago Shaft. But
and they're all just called Shaft.
yeah, they're all called Shaft. It'll be confusing, but worth it. But yeah, it was like, so I knew of it from that, and of course, like, just the cultural effect of Shaft, and the intro song, like, everyone knew that. I didn't see the movie, but I knew he's a bad mother, shut your mouth. I'm only talking about Shaft. We can dig it, which watching it go down in the movie is so interesting, because you would think that is what opens the movie, but there's a walking sequence that is a full minute before we even get any music. It's great.
Yeah, I was surprised that famous song isn't in the movie as much as I thought it would be. It ends the movie. There's that great final line he says in the phone booth, and as he's walking out, the theme song is going. But there's like most of the film, there's other kinds of score, which is great. But I was like, wow, this is so iconic. You'd think that the director would have used it more in the movie.
I know. I think because probably back then they didn't think, they're like, whatever. And now it's like the biggest thing people know of the movie. Like me, who has never seen the movie, definitely knew that score.
Yeah. So for our listeners who might not know the story of this movie, I just have a few sentences, a brief summary of what Shaft is about. So Harlem mobster Bumpy Jones hires private detective John Shaft, played by Richard Roundtree. This was his first major role in anything. He had done a little TV before, little commercials. This was his big debut on film, Richard Roundtree. So he hires Shaft to find his kidnapped daughter. When Shaft's first lead does not pan out, he acts on information from an NYPD lieutenant that mobsters have arrived in town and are trying to take over illegal businesses in Harlem. The closer he gets to the kidnapped daughter, the more danger Shaft finds himself in. It's kind of like the basic summary of the movie. I would say this movie is interesting more for its character and the style, really, than it is for the plot. Would you kind of agree with that?
Oh, yeah. There were moments where you almost kind of forget where it was going. It definitely meanders in a fun way, because it just feels like they just keep adding danger. Like, honestly, this movie as an improviser plays out like a really good improv scene where you're just adding more, you're heightening what's going on, but really cohesively as a story, it might not have go down that way. Like, there's a lot of corners you could have cut to really deal with each person one way or the other.
Yeah, I found myself responding more to his performance and the character than I am in the plot. And there's a lot of scenes of them in dark rooms, with detectives talking about the plot and what's happening, and I'm like, no, let's just spend time with him. He's what makes this work.
The more I think of it is kind of like, in the idea of noir, your detective is kind of he's not this hella suave guy. He's more of kind of bumbling along and kind of failing upwards into doing it. And I feel like this is Shaft's version, where it's he's failing upwards, but still in a cool way. We still want him to seem cool, because there were just so many moments where oh, if you would have did this differently, we would have credit rolled by now. But it's all these miscommunications, people getting thrown out of windows, which seems definitely wasn't necessary. The more I think about it, the more those guys who came to see him didn't actually want to attack him. He just kind of was on the offensive. They kind of came to be like, hey. And then when they meet with the guy, he's like, oh no, I just kind of wanted to ask you to do this mission. They weren't there to rough you up, dude.
Yeah, exactly. So I have some trivia about the movie, some interesting things. Please. So this was adapted from a novel by Ernest Tidyman. In the novel, Shaft was a white character.
Oh,
it
really?
was director Gordon Parks who, when they were working on the film adaptation, they said, let's let's make him a black character. So it originally was a white man in the novel. Kind of interesting.
Oh man,
not something I would have assumed. I would have assumed the opposite, right?
yeah. I know it kind of goes back to like we were saying in the noir thing, where now it makes so much sense of this kind of like bumbling forward, but still in a cool way. But also I do want to give props too, because I mean, I think there's so many good moments in like getting black people involved in film, which was the simple choice of being like, oh, this person doesn't have to be white, like, you know, like that. And it is that simple, even though, you know, many nerds online will make it seem like it's sacrilege and you're losing the hundreds of white characters. But yeah, it's like, I think of moments like that where they're like, oh, let's just make them black. Or even like, you know, Troy on Community, who was originally written as white, and then Donald Glover gets his start just because Dan Harmon's like, yeah, I there's no sure, he's the funniest.
So the director said in a documentary, he hoped he would inspire young African Americans by presenting them with a hero in a film they had never seen before.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so we had Sidney Poitier, 1967. We get In the Heat of the Night, and all of his, you know, exceptional work in the 60s, even back into the 50s too. But yeah, I feel like this kind of a character we had not really seen in a lead role in a major film, right? Come early 71.
Oh yeah. No, it really did, you know, change. And it was cool because it was interestingly handled in a way that I feel like resonated today, where you have this guy who's kind of he is a crime fighter, but he doesn't want to be seen as working with the cops like that. And it felt, and there were so many elements in there where you could tell like they're trying to speak truth to like the racism that a person of color or black person specifically deals with. And I thought it was like really like fun and interesting and kind of like important in a way, like something as simple as like the cabbie scene, like that was really just there. It wasn't really necessary. It was just like a fun kind of point of authenticity. Maybe it like, you know, maybe justified why he might have been late to his own meeting, but in the end I felt like that was just an extra thing that, you know, that was tossed in there. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see. Isaac Hayes auditioned for the title role of Shaft.
Really?
Ended up creating the music instead.
Yeah, I know. I wonder if how Isaac Hayes felt about that. Like it was like, you can't be Shaft, but you can do the soundtrack. Like
we're not going to let you be in the movie.
Yeah,
but you can, you know, create the songs, create the soundtrack, and win an Academy Award. As he did.
I guess, you know, I guess he did come out on top. We can't. I mean, if you get the Oscar, well, yeah, I'll take that. I'll take it. I didn't get the main role, but I got an Oscar. All right, I'll take that.
I mean, there are some huge, famous, iconic films of 1971, right? You get McCabe and Mrs. Miller, and Clute, and A Clockwork Orange, and Harold and Maude, and The French Connection. So many movies. This is the film that won Best Original Song at the Academy Awards, which is fantastic. Right?
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense, mostly because it's still, you know, present till this day. If you play that, you know, just that everyone knows what it is. So they were right. They made the right choice.
Yeah, it got 2 nominations, one for Best Original Dramatic Score and Best Song Original for the Picture. That's what it was called back in 1972. So Isaac Hayes won his Academy Award. He was the first African-American to win an Oscar in that category of original song.
Wow.
I don't know how long that category had been around. I don't think they had it at the very beginning, but the Oscars go all the way back to 1929, I want to say.
Yeah.
So it's almost 100 years.
I know, that's interesting too, because I mean, in a way that puts Isaac Hayes had the opportunity to get close to that EGOT, because, you know, he has an Oscar. I'm sure he has a Grammy.
He has to have a Grammy.
Yeah, that I don't even have to think of. But then, you know, he
won a Grammy Award for Shaft.
But yeah, so he got a Grammy. He got the Grammy for Shaft too, and but he got the NAACP award. He got nominated for South Park. But I was like, yeah, if he kept going with South Park, he could have got an Emmy. But I don't know. I don't think he would have gotten the Emmy for that.
Would he have gotten a Tony for anything? Did he create any musicals or?
Well, maybe if he didn't fall out with Trey and them with, he could have maybe wrote a song in Book of Mormon, and that would have gave him the Tony.
That would have done it.
Yeah.
So a
Oh,
couple other things. Shaft is one of the first movies ever that has a character on screen saying that he is gay. That's something I
yes.
noticed while
Oh,
watching
I
the
did.
movie, and not only saying he's gay, but proud of it,
Yeah,
right?
and
Not like a
I know.
throwaway joke, which
I
I
want to
which I thought was
that
great.
I really, really was, because I braced myself, when this character comes and he
Yeah,
has this like lisp, and I'm
yeah.
like,
I was
uh-oh,
like,
what are we
uh-oh.
gonna go? And then it's like, no, it's just he's a character, and that's just a part of him. And as a matter of fact, he's a great wingman for Shaft. I mean, I was like, this is yes, I'm all about it.
Yeah. So, and we'll talk about that too. That's a great scene. I like the scene in the bar. It was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
So the film made about $13 million on a budget of only $500,000, earning enough money to save the then struggling MGM from bankruptcy in
Yeah,
71. Like this was a huge moneymaker for them. Doesn't sound
yeah.
like a lot of money now, like 13 million really, but it was made for such a small budget and then did big business all throughout the second half of 71.
Ooh.
Did a lot for MGM.
Yeah. Oh man, yeah, it was this one I could see it, and like we kind of talked about earlier, it kind of started the whole Blaxploitation movement,
Mm-hmm.
and just I think they did it, right. I mean, there were like, I feel like this film is just kind of like we alluded to, stuffed a bit,
Yeah.
and could be
At
could be
only
made
100
efficient.
minutes.
Yeah.
It's not long.
Yeah, because it's kind of like these elements, right, where you have all these people at play, where you have the mobs versus the black mobsters, and you have this kidnapping, then you have the
Mhm.
police that's in on it. They don't give Shaft all the information, the mobsters don't give Shaft all the information, and then we have to see Shaft go back to both of them and say, y'all didn't give me the
Yeah.
information. Then they clarify, we see both of them clarify. I was like, we could have just we could have got it. We could have had Shaft kind of pick up some of these pieces and not have these, like, it really felt like a RPG fetch quest where he kept going back to the appropriate missions.
Yeah. So the last thing I have to share trivia wise is, did you know there's like a bunch of sequels? Not just the 2000 film with Samuel L. Jackson and the 2019 that brought like grandpa, the dad, and the son together. But there were two sequels made to Shaft very quickly: 1972's Shaft's Big Score and 1973's Shaft in Africa.
Oh my
Which I'm like,
gosh.
I'm intrigued. They're both with Roundtree. He came back for the sequels. And then he did a TV series on Shaft
Okay,
from
I remember that.
73 to 74, but it's only like 7 episodes. So I'm wondering if
Oh
they're more like longer TV movies,
yeah.
maybe.
Oh, that's so interesting.
And
to
I'm like, so they take him to Africa and then they don't make another film of Shaft until 2000 with Jackson. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
You think there would have been a series of like 10 of them throughout the 70s, just one a year?
Yeah.
Every year. Have you heard of or seen any of the sequels or the newer versions with Jackson?
No, I've seen the Samuel L. Jackson version, but I haven't seen the newer one, which, everyone was saying was all right. I didn't,
Yeah.
yeah, it wasn't, I didn't get enough fanfare to make me feel like I had to go see it.
Yeah.
But I'm curious to watch through all the kind of like flagship Shaft reboots. So jump from this to the Samuel L. Jackson Shaft, and see if see how it holds up,
Yeah.
especially because you get to see Richard Roundtree come back.
Yeah. You see it like a through line if there's like a callback to Shaft in Africa in the newest
Yeah,
version.
exactly. Yeah, I'll let you know. I'll let you know. I won't put you through it. But
All right. All right, so that takes us to Shaft. What our thoughts are on this movie? What did you think of the 1971 Shaft, Ify?
Oh man, I really enjoyed it. It was, I mean, pretty much I feel like a lot of the things that I wasn't the biggest fan of are just kind of things that were just element of 70s filmmaking.
Yeah.
Like I think 70s filmmaking really wanted to, and I say this, I know Alonzo would probably cringe at me speaking on filmmaking in the 70s, but I just attribute like some of these longer shots that are giving all the information a work at the time. Like, I'm not going to be like, oh, I could have done without that, because who knows? That's probably how, but I definitely could have done without that. But I think it was very fun. It felt very vibrant and lived, lived in, like New
Mm-hmm.
York felt lively. if anything, I'd love a little more exteriors in Harlem that wasn't so like the outside of the building than we're inside, because like when that shot of Times Square seems like such a good time capsule piece, right? Something that, you know, I feel like people can look at now and go, whoa, you know, so it would have been nice to see some of the other boroughs in that same light.
Yeah, you say time capsule, and I actually wrote that down on my notes. Like, I've looked at 40 to 45 films for the podcast so far since last summer, and this one, more than any other, genuinely feels of 1971. It feels like this really cool time capsule of how like indie filmmaking was being done in that time period, using an actor who the world did not know yet in this kind of really innovative way in this movie. I love the exteriors in this movie, the handheld camera, the way the film is put together. As I said at the top, the story of the movie I wasn't super involved in. Like the mystery of like, and like who's the killer, and I'm like, like I've kind of seen that before and other things. But the way it's put together and Roundtree's performance is what really gravitated me towards this movie, and I really, really enjoyed it. Like, I had a great time with it.
Yeah, I think that's totally the right the right there, because I picked up the same thing where I wasn't as interested in the stories as the characters. I like the relationship between the chief and Shaft. I like this kind of like, you know, this uneasy tension between him and the mobsters, and then I liked seeing all of those characters come together.
So let's see. So what? Yeah, what else about the film do we like? What did we think of the sex scenes? Were interesting in this?
Oh, it was so it's so funny because it's like there's this like idea of sensualness and like the hand on the back that was like really funny to me. The also, I love that like we see the first sex scene and it's kind of established that this is his like girlfriend or lady, and then he proceeds to have sex with somebody completely different later in the movie for no reason. It's just like, I was like, oh, okay. And it wasn't to get any information. It was just like this person was into him, so he had sex with him. So I don't know if that's a thing of the 70s too, where it's like, look, we just out here and we in these streets.
The first sex scene is really stylized. There's a lot of color. Like we get like a lot of shots of like the back, and the camera's kind of almost floating in the room. And I love that line he says right after someone says to him, John, what'd you get? And he says, I got laid.
Yeah. He always had jokes. It really felt like talking to a comedian, where it's like, I'm trying to get information and you're just doing bits here. John, I'm on a case. People are dying. Can we stop talking about you getting laid?
Yeah, I had kind of mixed feelings about the last 20 minutes of the movie. I liked that there was more at stake. There was more urgency. Like, finally something big is happening and there's a big shootout and it's exciting. At the same time, that's kind of an ending we've seen before in a lot of other movies kind of similar to this. But there were stretches about halfway through, I'm kind of like, all right, we could like raise the stakes a little. And like, so when he gets injured and he has to like take care of that bullet wound, and then we get to that last big shootout, I'm like, okay, now here we go.
Oh yeah, it was great, but it did feel like it was building a little too long into that shootout. We were seeing the setup, and I was like, okay, this is you decided to Ocean's 11 this in this small piece of time that we have. And like I said before, it was just funny seeing how it wasn't played for comedy, but it felt like the whole team was full of bumbling guys. You had the dropping of this huge duffel bag that alerted everyone in the building, and they only got lucky because there was one lazy henchman, which there's always that one lazy henchman is the reason that the boss loses. He was like, I didn't hear nothing. He was like, yeah, you were asleep, bro.
I like that when the story's over, the movie's done. We don't hang around for 20 minutes. Like,
oh man,
we get that last line of him in the phone booth, and then the music begins by Hayes, and we're out. I've always liked films that don't hang around too long when it's over.
It feels like such a modern problem where it's like, okay, but we have to see that everyone live happily. No, we can just assume that everything's good. We don't have to see the effects of this ending situation. But I mean, I think the crescendo of this, what I've called modern problem, was seen in, like, you know, the Snyder cut, where like the whole bottom half of the movie felt like it could have just not been there. Like it could have ended after they won. Like I was ready for a credit roll, and we got all this extra setup to a universe that it doesn't exist. But I think that was just more Hollywood gymnastics and technique that we were seeing, which is Snyder trying to set up this world, garner people's desire for it, and garner it into getting more movies that Warner Brother was like, no.
Yeah, that's been kind of a problem you see with a lot of streaming shows and movies. There's not as much emphasis on let's keep it brief. It's like,
Yeah,
it's almost the opposite. It's like, okay, this is going way too long. I mean, some stories do not have to be 8 episodes, right? Like
yeah,
some films like on Netflix will premiere and it's like 2.5 hours long and it's a romantic comedy. And you're like, okay, like, could be a little shorter. But
well,
yeah,
I know that's so interesting, because I feel like there's just a certain point where I feel like maybe the producers and executives get excited at creating like this like long Fast and Furious Avengers-esque universe, which look, I love Fast and Furious, so I'm never against it, but there does become an element where it's like it has to fit the style. Like we've gotten into the serialization of Fast and Furious by the time we hit Fast 5. Like that's when they hit the stride.
Yeah,
and
that's my favorite one of all of them is Fast 5.
And they've set it up, because like they've set it up that these are the folks you go to if cars are involved in some major crime. So now you just have an endless reason to come back. And I feel like a way they kind of twisted that, where it seemed like it wasn't necessary. And a friend pointed this out to me, and I wouldn't have noticed, but in John Wick, the first 2 can be these bottle movies that contain within themselves.
Yeah.
And then 3 is when they start to really feel like they're trying to connect, because they've realized they created this world that everyone liked. But I think you can still do these movies that continue and still keep them in a bottle, because I think in the long run, it just would be fun if somebody can come in at John Wick 5 and be fine, you know, like, you know, like I think people like that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has, you know, figured out a way to get a bunch of people to watch like 18 movies. But I think, you know, that shouldn't be the standard. You know.
Exactly.
Like I get it. Don't, trust me, I'm not saying anyone's wrong here, because I get, though, I see the money bags in getting, you know, a large group of people invested in 10 plus movies. But I think from a storytelling standpoint, you start to stretch stories that can't be stretched the same way. Like superheroes, you can do it. They, from the books, the source material, it's already been created in this spanning way where you can have multiple movies. This one assassin who's on the run, I don't necessarily think we
needs a whole movie.
Yeah, it needs a whole movie.
Yeah, this idea of like, oh, we have 800 more stories to tell in the Marvel. It's like, no thanks, I'm good.
Yeah.
But getting back to Shaft, which should have a Marvel-like universe, I think, right? Should have had one the last 50 years.
Yeah.
I mean, every character in this first movie should have had its own spinoff.
Honestly, I would be down for it. Every character,
I would watch them.
Yeah, I would watch.
So what do you think that the director Gordon Parks brought to this movie as director, beyond obviously his great decision to cast an African American in the lead role? I think if this had been a white actor, I don't think we'd be talking about it today. I don't think there'd be anything in the movie, like story-wise, that would really, you know, be an important, you know, part of film history. I think that decision was really important. Anything else he brought to the movie in terms of the cinematography, the way it's put together, that you liked?
Oh yeah, I think, like we were saying, those like beautiful exteriors look great. And I think just also there's something interesting to like putting this black cool hero in a lot of these white spaces, and not having, because we're talking about it now, right? How, you know, there's starting to be an element of like oppression porn in films, because that's the one people want to green light. But there is something cool into seeing the you know, seeing the people like exist, you know, and
Mhm.
and sit and grab an espresso and is treated with respect. And
Mhm.
you know, like that to me, I think is what really stands out to me in this, is that it's the movie from the 70s. And I will say, I was assuming, you know, Gordon Parks was white. I didn't do my research, but
Mhm.
now kind of like looking into it and seeing that he was black, it just makes
Mhm.
it makes everything make so mumuch more sense. And I
Mhm.
think that was everything I just said is extremely intentional.
Yeah. I think he does a great job with this movie. He gives it like this lived in feeling. Like
Yes.
I get the sense that, you know, we're not just discovering this character for the first time. He feels like someone who's been around, who's had other cases, and just showing New York in the way he does in this movie is a New York I've never seen, I feel, on film before. And
Yeah.
I loved, you know, what he brought to this stylistically as well. Why do you think Richard Roundtree like really hit the zeitgeist with this movie? What did he bring to this
Oh,
character that's so memorable and iconic?
I'm so glad you said that, because I was like truly looking at him and thinking the same thing, where it's like it like there's something to him that not only is he like conventionally attractive, but he
Mhm.
also has this like badassness to him,
Yeah.
you know? And I think that is what really is kind of like what really is the standout here, is you
Mhm.
get this guy who is conventionally attractive, who also looks like he is a badass. You get to present this black male in a light that isn't aggressive. You know,
Mhm.
he seems like suave, he seems smooth. He's like a
Mhm.
James Bond.
Yeah.
And I think especially at the time when it came out, that was important, because
Mhm.
you know, it's very easy, I feel like, in the earlier days of film to present a tough black guy who seems like cool, big, and scary.
Yeah.
But to make him, you know, kind of just suave and charismatic changes everything.
Mhm. Yeah, he does everything right in this. I mean, he's believable in his role.
Mm-hmm.
You believe that he can stand up for himself and be so
Oh yeah.
confident in his job. You believe that the ladies want him, right? There's that shot, he goes into the bar for the first time. There's that white lady like in the booth, and she is like throwing herself at him in a way I've never seen a woman throw
Yeah.
herself at a man in a movie before. Like, it's amazing. And you
Yeah.
believe that charismatic element to him, unlike Samuel L. Jackson a little bit, right? In the
Yeah.
2000
I
film,
mean,
he has everything going for him except for the woman aspect. Like, that's something Roundtree has in this that is just fantastic.
yeah, there's, you know, no disrespect to my man Samuel L.
Yeah.
Jackson, but like, you know, yeah, he's always kind of come to the screen as a badass, you know,
Yeah.
like he is not like, he's not gonna get the ladies, he's gonna snap all the people in here into
Yeah.
shape, you know, like like I definitely would like he just has this like domineering energy, you
Yeah.
know, and I mean, look, I'm sure Samuel L. Jackson has no problem getting the ladies,
That's right.
but I think when it comes to in the way that Shaft does, it's
Yeah.
a whole different energy. It's a
Yeah.
whole different energy.
Yeah. Yeah, I just thought he was great in this. He's so much fun to watch. He makes me want to seek out the two sequels, which I'm assuming probably aren't as good as this original, since I had not
Yeah.
heard of the sequels before. But he's just like he feels so much of this character right from the get go. I would just love to see more of him in this role. Any other favorite scenes? Any other scenes from the film that we have not talked about that you thought were interesting or you wanted to
I
discuss?
really, yeah, I really liked the the kind of like the shootout scene seemed very interesting,
Yeah.
because like the they'll kill me to stop you, I feel like, gets used every now and then, but you don't see it that much. So it was kind of shocking for me when they shot through him to get to Shaft. I was like, damn, okay.
That's right. That's
like,
an intense scene.
Yeah, I was like, okay. Now, and that kind of it's fun because we do talk about the stakes in the movie, and it really did like shoot up the stakes.
That's when it shoots up to like an 11.
Yeah, and you're like, okay, it's serious. So yeah, that I really did like that scene a lot.
Yeah, there is this kind of relaxed attitude to him that you're like, oh, nothing's really
exactly
nothing bad is going to happen to Roundtree in this. Like, he's just going to skate through every scene and shoot the bad guy. And when he gets shot there and he's, you know, badly wounded and goes to that apartment and he's like needs to get the bullet taken out, I'm like, oh crap. Yeah. Okay, so I mean, his name is in the title. I think he will survive the movie, but I'm like,
yeah, real bold move to kill Shaft in the second act.
Yeah, I've been waiting. Have they made that movie yet? Where like the hero of the movie gets shot like in minute 40, and then the rest of the movie is about someone else.
Well, I think the closest we got to it was Bryan Cranston in Godzilla.
Oh, that's right.
They really made you think it was going to be about him.
There's a horror film called Feast from a while back. I remember that it opens with the guy you think is going to be the hero. He's like the really studly, you know, jock kind of character, and you're like, oh, this is going to be the hero of the movie, and then he's the first to die. Yeah. So they have messed with it before.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I really like that bar scene. As we said, I was a little nervous about that character. I was like, oh no, 1971, this could be rough. But yeah, he really owned his sexuality, and he's like, yeah, I have no interest in her. You know, I'm proud of who I am. Yeah. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, I did not expect that scene to be in Shaft. I was like, okay.
Well, I mean, now, especially, you know, I did a little quick, you know, search while talking about the director, and Gordon Parks was, you know, big into civil rights. And and most people, you know, civil rights and gay rights kind of came up against each other, you know, and I think, you know, you did have a lot of civil rights people supporting the gay community too. Yeah. So I once again, I think it was another conscious choice, and it really adds weight to this movie, Shaft, you know, where it's like, oh, this was like, quote unquote, just a movie, but there were things being said in very subtle ways.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I really enjoyed this film. My last question I ask of each guest is, if they were to make this movie now, how would it be similar? How would it be different? We get kind of an answer, I guess, since we just had a version in 2019, which I have not seen yet. I've seen some clips of it. I think it's mostly about the son. And then I think Richard Roundtree is just in like the later part of the movie. I think he comes in, grandpa with his guns. Yeah. That kind of idea. Yeah. But like, but it's kind of, so it's a little, this one's kind of hard to answer because we have had the 2000 film and the 2019 film, but I'm just like, if they were to take this exact story, this exact character, and they made it in 2021, like, what do you think would be similar? What would be different?
Oh man, I think there would be a lot less travel.
Traveling.
They're you know, we have cell phones, and they're you know, but I think it'd be interesting because, you know, this era of like mobster crime, I think people have a hard way of portraying it now, because like that's kind of like the old way to do crime, where there's like more subtle ways I think people have to do it. So really I think they would almost change it up a lot and I'd imagine it'd be like a tech crime, very white collar, with dark tendencies. I feel like that's modern crime drama, is like tech money and dark means behind it, and everything's in the shadows. But it is like, it would be interesting to see kind of like an upfront kind of more gritty crime in modern times.
I think that's the version I'd like to see, because I think the 2019 version is a very kind of Hollywood film. I'd love to see like a low budget kind of grittier version of the 70s story done in the 2020s with a new actor. Would be kind of interesting to see. I think the female characters would be more fleshed out too. I mean, they're a little bit, they're a little one note in this movie.
Yeah, they literally say a line and then have sex with Chad.
Yeah,
that's about it.
The second one, like in the shower, right? I'm
she
like,
said,
wait, what's her name?
Yeah, we never got a name. We know she had titillizing boobs was the line in the movie.
Exactly. I don't know if they could call the new version Shaft, since we've had
Yeah.
3 films now called Shaft and a show called Shaft.
Yeah, I know.
think maybe we'd wait just another 10 years and we could do it again, but
yeah,
it can get kind of confusing. But yeah, so I would give this a solid 3.5 stars out of 4. I really had a great time. I think it's an important film in film history, especially of the early 1970s.
Oh, yeah.
I'm glad I finally got a chance to watch it. I'd never seen it before.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I had a good time.
I definitely co-sign that. I will +1 it. I also say 3.5 out of 4. That's a great one.
All right, so that takes us to our final 2 segments. The first one's called the Divine Double Feature. That's where we pick a more modern film that would pair well with 1971's Shaft. What film did you go with for the Divine Double Feature?
For the Divine Double Feature, I feel like people think I would say the newer Shaft, but actually The Nice Guys, I think, kind of has the same energy of just, you know, just like trying to solve just a simple case. There's a lot of ins, a lot of outs, a lot of what have yous. Shout out to everyone who catches that reference. But it's gritty in a very modern way, and it's very fun. And I love when Ryan Gosling gets to be funny. So that's my pick.
Yes, Ryan Gosling, and Russell Crowe. They don't get to be funny that much on film, and they're great together in that movie. That's a lot of fun. I feel like that movie kind of came and went in the theater. Like, not a lot of people saw it. A lot of people discovered it later, like after it had come out on DVD and stuff. But that's a really fun movie. I enjoyed that one.
If I truly believe it's like it really is like it was like a packed weekend, because I remember going to see it and I went to see like 2 other films that weekend. So it was like I kind of got stuck. Yeah.
So my pick is Dolomite Is My Name from 2019 with Eddie Murphy, which was one of my favorite films of 2019. One of the best performances I think of Eddie Murphy's ever done, and it premiered on Netflix. And boy, I remember when I watched it opening night with my brother, and we both just absolutely loved it. I had no idea what to expect. I didn't know a whole lot about it. But that's a great kind of tribute to this era of filmmaking of the 70s, kind of the Blaxploitation era of movie making. And I just think the cast in that movie is exceptional. The costume design, the performances, any excuse to rewatch Dolomite Is My Name, I think is a good one. Did you see that movie?
Oh yeah, I loved it. It was great. And I think, I'm really vibing on the exact reason you picked it, because I think, you know, especially knowing everything we knew or knowing everything we talked about going into this, and then kind of seeing a flip on that and seeing like something that was essentially like inspired by this movie, it just really would be a fun double feature, because it's almost like jumping from the movie and then you kind of pull out of the theater and you get to see the world around Shaft.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a great movie. If you've not seen Dolomite Is My Name, check it out. It's on Netflix. All right, so our last segment, Beyond the Flick, I wanted to talk about the Blaxploitation genre today. Kind of what has been your take on those kinds of films? How many of those have you seen? It's mostly films from the 70s, and many critics say it started with Shaft and Sweetback's Badass Song in 71.
Oh yeah. I mean, especially because like I think the like major one that is supposed to the major one the like kind of film that is supposed to kind of bring in Blaxploitation is Superfly, which came out in 72. So I think that's a very accurate, and I've bounced around. I've seen some of Superfly. I've seen some of like a whole bunch of these other kind of films.
Pam Grier's in a lot of them. Foxy Brown and Coffee.
Yeah. Oh man, it's like it really is like such a type, and it came and went, and it was truly like a beautiful beautiful era. And then if you want to kind of see like a modern look back, then look no other than Black Dynamite, which is like super fun, and
that's
hilarious.
A good one too. Yeah.
So I didn't really deep dive it as much as I should. As a matter of fact, after you've inspired me with Shaft, that I do want to go back and watch all these. But it was an era that, you know, is kind of looked at. And I mean, like, if you want to go even further back and another kind of fun play on it, I'm gonna get you Sucker is great. Yeah. So yeah, it's such a important piece of Black cinema. And yeah, I can't wait to do this deep dive I have planned.
I'm excited to watch. So many of these films came out in the next 3 years, between like 72 and 74. I'm a huge horror movie fan, so I'm excited to watch Blackula.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. I've only heard good things.
Which I've seen some clips. There was a documentary I watched, I want to say in the last 5 years, that had clips from Blackula. And I was like, this looks amazing. I got to watch this. So yeah, that's coming up. There's a film called Across 110th Street, which I know of as the opening song in Jackie Brown, one of my favorite films from the late 90s. And so there's a lot of titles here I'm excited to check out.
I know. I wrote those two down. That's what I'm doing right now.
I don't know what year Across 110th Street came out. I'm pretty sure Blackula was 72. So we'll probably get to that one next year. Yeah.
Okay.
That's what's fun about this podcast. It's like if it came out in 72, I'm like, well, I'll get to it. I'll get to it in a few months.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, but yeah, so a lot of these films, excited to see, and yeah, it really kind of began with Sweetback's badass song and Shaft, and then into Superfly in '72, this kind of era of filmmaking. But yeah, I mean, a lot of the famous iconic films of the early 70s, have just like all white cast, white straight director, a lot of male directors. We've talked on the podcast before, very, very few female directors at this time.
Yeah.
So when we get an Elaine May who makes a film like A New Leaf, or, I mean, there's just a couple. So, any film that goes beyond just the kind of ensemble and the kind of director we see in movie after movie, I want to cheer for, and I want to celebrate on the podcast.
That's why I think you're great.
All right. So that takes us to the end here. Ify, do you have anything you'd like to promote, or if you want to talk about kind of where our listeners can find you online, now would be the time.
Yeah, of course. You can find me online at Ify Nwadiwe on Twitter and Instagram. And definitely check out the podcast Maximum Film. It's on Maximum Fun. It's a great time. We love doing a fun deep dive into many movies. And yeah, if you follow me on social, you'll know what I'm up to, where the things I'm doing are at, and all that good stuff.
All right. Well, thanks so much for being here. And thanks to all of you for listening. You can find us online at filmat50.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And until next time, remember, 50 never looked this good.
Oh, that's a good ending.